All right, great. Let's get started, everyone. Welcome, and thank you for joining us. Let's talk ADUs. First, I want to say Happy Veterans Day to everyone, and especially the veterans out there for your service to our country and the families of veterans. Thank you. I appreciate everything that you do for us. So we're talking about accessory dwelling units today, also known as ADUs. ADUs are small homes that can have a big impact. And I'll be hosting this conversation, which is Build It Green's 5th fall forum called Streamlining Policy Planning and Code for ADUs. My name is Darin Ranelletti, and I'm the Policy Director for Housing Security in the Office of Oakland Mayor Libby Schaaf. Like many cities, Oakland has taken steps to promote ADUs due to the variety of benefits that they provide. So I'm really looking forward to digging into ADU policy and code issues today. I think we're all going to learn a lot. As you know, California is in the midst of a major housing crisis. It's projected that the state will need to build 3.5 million homes by 2025 to properly house Californians. Many of us in California believe that ADUs and communities of homeowners can help meet the challenge of providing safe, healthy, and affordable housing. Over the last few years, the state has taken a number of steps to promote ADUs. And on January 1st of this year, a new set of state mandated rules went into effect that removed additional barriers related to ADUs. ADU construction in the state is skyrocketing, but challenges remain, including cost, the process, and code challenges. ADUs cost less to build typically than multifamily rental units on a per unit basis, but they're still expensive for the average homeowner. And homeowners, they're not, typically they're not professional developers. So building an ADU can be tricky. And while California's ambitious energy and building codes lead the nation on sustainability, and we have this, global climate crisis, sometimes these codes can be onerous for small scale buildings. So let's meet the panelists. Today, we're really fortunate to hear from 3 experts in the fields of ADUs and green building. Each one brings a unique perspective on policies, planning, and building codes for ADUs. First, we have Peggy Jensen, who is the Deputy County Manager for the County of San Mateo. She leads their task force for the Second Unit Center, a program for the county's Home for All initiative that provides information and tools to make it easier for homeowners to build second units and help increase the affordable housing supply in the county. Welcome, Peggy.
Thank you.
Next, we have Sarah Shull, who's with the City of San Jose as the city's designated ADU ally. She helps guide homeowners and building professionals through the process of building an ADU and find resources like the city's pre-approved ADU designs, as well as financing options and educational workshops through the Housing Trust Silicon Valley. So welcome, Sarah.
Thank you.
And finally, we have Wes Sullins, who is a lead fellow and director in the lead program team at U.S. Green Building Council. There, he leads the organization's technical alignment with LEED and green building codes, including the Model International Green Construction Code. He also directs materials and resources activities for the USGBC. Welcome, Wes.
Thank you.
Thanks to all of you for taking the time to speak with us today, and thank you to the audience for sharing part of your afternoon with us. We'd like to keep this session as interactive as possible, so feel free to enter questions during the session into the Q&A box or the chat box in Zoom, and when we wrap up our panel discussion, we'll try to get to as many questions as we can. So before we get started, we're going to do a quick poll, see who's in the audience today. You're going to see a screen pop up. Go ahead and select 2 roles that you most identify with. And in a second, we'll get the results. Let's see. Do we have results? Here we go. A lot of variety. Looks like 20% architects, designers, 16% builders, contractors, 18% building officials, government, some nonprofit advocates, green building consultants, and some real estate professionals, and one student, and a couple others. So great, real diverse group of folks. That's great. We're all going to learn a lot about ADUs. Thank you all for taking the time to join us. So let's get started. So as I mentioned before, the state has rolled out regulations, and recently a set of new regulations around ADUs. Some of those key features include things like new guidelines for ADU approvals, prohibitions on minimum lot size requirements, removing some of the zoning conditions and unreasonable restrictions that existed, banning the unreasonable homeowner association prohibitions on ADUs, and most notably requiring local agencies to issue decisions on ADUs within 60 days. So Peggy, I want to start with you. The County of San Mateo and the Second Unit Initiative has been ahead of the state in many ways. I know in Oakland, we often look across the bay to San Mateo to see what you all are doing. I was wondering if you could briefly describe how the county became an early adopter of this work, and how you think working at the county level might distinguish what you do from a city level implementation.
Certainly. Well, thank you very much for inviting me today. It's a pleasure to be here to talk about ADUs, a topic that's very near and dear to all of us who are working on housing in San Mateo County. In terms of how our work with second units came about, back in 2015, our Board of Supervisors decided they really needed to work on affordable housing. Back then, San Mateo had a jobs housing gap of about 24 new jobs for every new housing unit. And we knew that we had to close that gap if in fact we're going to remain competitive regionally. So we put together a series of ideas that was presented to our Board of Supervisors. And one of those ideas was exploring second units. The reason that became an option for California, looked like a very viable option for San Mateo County, was that about, I think if I got my numbers correct, about over 70% of the housing units in San Mateo County are single family dwelling. And many of them were built at a time when you had fairly large lots. And many of those property owners had owned their property for a fair amount of time. So we had land available, we had equity available, and the thought was ADUs could be a very good solution for additional housing, and specifically affordable housing. So that was the genesis of our work around second units. So in terms of how do we promote second units, we took a three-part process approach. And the first was, how do we explain to people why? We knew that there are folks who had the resources and the land to do this. So the first thing we did was we worked with our consultants, Darin Ranelletti, who are also our 21 Elements housing partner. And they put together what we called our inspiration book. It included stories around 6 local residents, San Mateo County residents who had constructed second units. It included floor plans, but it also included the stories. And those stories talked about why some people built it for family reasons, to provide space for extended family members. One of the most heartwarming examples was a family over on the coast side who had a son who has a son who had developmental disabilities. And they were planning for his long-term security. They built a second unit that they moved into, and the family that helps take care of him moved into their primary home. And ultimately that second unit will become revenue to provide for their son in the future. We also had people who built JADUs, some because they traveled a lot and they wanted somebody else staying on their property for security. And then one kind of interesting example, a fellow purchased a single family home that had a second unit in the backyard. And he moved into the second unit and rented out the single family home. And that was a way for him to get into the local housing market. So it started with the why. What are some of the various reasons that people could do? And it also included pictures, floor plans, to just get people thinking about it. The next step was to help them understand the how. What are the steps? And as you mentioned, Darin, most folks are not developers or contractors. They don't know how to go through that process. It's not familiar to them. So we developed, again, with Darin Ranelletti, a second unit workbook It's about 92 pages, and it includes a step-by-step approach to assessing whether or not your site is ready for second unit, the processes and regs and rules you have to go through, all the way through how to be a property owner, how to be a landlord. In addition to that, we also understood, as you've mentioned, that cost is a significant issue. And again, with Barrett and Driscoll, we developed our second unit, our ADU calculator, which is online. That includes, it provides information. It's a fill in the blank tool. And I suggest that anyone who's interested, look at it because it's really quite useful. It provides construction costs by type of construction, whether you want to build a JADU, a modular unit, garage conversion. It also provides financing cost options, monthly expense calculator, and then also monthly rent. So it gives you both the costs and the potential revenue, just as ballpark figures. We have built that out so that it's available by city in San Mateo County. And it's also available both in English and Spanish and Chinese, as our other two documents. I don't think the other two are available in Chinese, but I know they are available in English and Spanish. All these tools are available online at our second unit resources center. So your other question was about the role of the county versus the role of the cities. San Mateo County is a little bit unique. We have 20 cities in San Mateo County, and we do not have a queen city, if you will. We have 4 cities that are large. Our largest 4 cities are about 100,000, and our smallest communities are around 5,000. So therefore, the county has the largest staff and the most significant resources. We also had a special tax measure that was adopted by the county about 5 years ago. And that has given us some resources to do some significant work. Significant amount of that tax revenue has been contributed to affordable housing. And a piece was also carved out for all of our second unit work. Each city in the county has to adopt their own rules and regulations, but we had the ability through our Home for All program, which had brought all the cities together, to be the convener, to find out what they needed, to provide resources that they could share with their residents. All of the documents and the website are all part of the way of promoting second units as a concept. So we have a specific role, but it's up to the cities to promote it and to do actually the regulatory review.
That's great. I really like hearing about that city-county coordination, and thank you for the work that you're doing.
Sure.
That's fantastic. Let's stay in the South Bay and swing over to San Jose. I'm really interested in hearing from you, Sarah, about the ADU Ally. So that's this new position within the city. Could you tell us a little bit about how that came about and what type of service you provide to residents and what are the gaps that residents need versus, what can the city do to fill those gaps?
Sure. So I'm the ADU Ally with the City of San Jose. It's the program launched, the Streamlined ADU Program with the City of San Jose launched in August last year. So it's still relatively new, and it's we're answering the call of homeowners to construct these ADUs, and then also through the city mayor's office. There is a Backyard Homes webpage, and they're endorsing, promoting ADUs and the power of the homeowner to take advantage of their property and answer some of their or other housing questions or crises around the Bay Area. So when the program launched, I came on to kind of demystify the permitting process for any customer coming up, basically, and that's still what I do today. So it's not really surprising that for me to see that we have a really good variety of viewers today, which is fantastic because everybody has the piece to play. It takes a village, it's construction, and it is often homeowners, it is development 101, and not only development 101, but development in San Jose, and then customers that have multiple properties, managing which county or city that property is in, and then also what those ADU regulations are. So within San Jose, I'm there to help kind of where do I start? Where's the information? Who do I contact? I'm always there for all of that. And I schedule the intake appointments and things like that. But basically it's to streamline the process and take my experience and lessons learned, customer challenges, common customer questions, to kind of turn all of this into an ultimately more helpful, more useful program for homeowners, where the boots really meet the ground. So we have tools like our web pages, handouts, me, to help kind of guide people to understand what the regulations are in San Jose. That's usually the first stop. Do some research about the property, do some homework before you contact a professional, because a lot of it is about money and finances. So how do we save as much? What are we really getting into? And in San Jose, of course, and I'm sure other cities, you can do all of that with no money down or really having to talk with a professional and pay them any money. So we have those resources online with the intent that homeowners or professionals will access those resources, give it a read. They will certainly always have questions. I'm here, and then if I can't directly answer something, I pull on the experience of my colleagues and the technical information knowers to answer those questions fully, get them through the process. So that's pretty much what I do. There are gaps, of course, like when you had mentioned the Housing Trust Silicon Valley. Cities and local jurisdictions can't always really help with finances. So we have, and graciously through the Housing Trust Silicon Valley, they have been kind of like our go-between for that. They do have a program for financing and kind of education for what an ADU is, what are your financing options potentially in San Jose with them, or maybe you're looking into a different company or agency for that. So those are kind of the roles that I play, some things that the city kind of alley-oops to another team member. But whatever the question, just let me know and we can figure it out in San Jose.
That's great, Sarah. I wish every city had a ADU ally like that. I think that's, that's really key. And keeping in this theme around assistance for owners, I want to jump back over to the peninsula really quick. Peggy, can you tell us a little bit about the one-stop shop and helping homeowners navigate the process, and maybe a little bit also around, we talked about the challenges of process and cost and so forth, but neighborhood resistance. Sometimes, homeowners encounter that, and is there anything that you're doing around that?
There we go. So in terms of the one-stop shop, the county has partnered with Hello Housing to put together essentially a variation on what San Jose is doing. 4 cities in the county put forward, I think, $50,000 each, and in partnership with Hello Housing, they're essentially providing a concierge program for people who want to build second units, up to 20 units countywide, essentially holding their hands from the very beginning, walking through the costs, walking through the site plan, working with a tool that called Symbian, which we were fortunate to connect with actually quite a while ago, that helps people determine what the regulations are and whether their lot can accommodate a second unit, all the way through working with it, selecting a contractor, working with that contractor, and then leasing up the property if it's to be leased, or long-term management. At this point, I think they've got 12 projects under construction. They have a waiting list of folks who are interested in participating. Because of the subsidies, this program is free to these folks. Our hope is that it is so successful in getting second units built that people will be willing to pay for this assistance, that the value will be there for additional folks who want to build second units. I'm sorry, the second part of your conversation, your question was?
Yeah, are you encountering any neighborhood resistance, and does
right.
the one-stop shop help owners with that?
I don't know what they've encountered. I mean, we have, once the state adopted their new requirements around second units, we have not seen as much pushback as we have in the past. It varies. And what we're seeing more of right now, which people may be a little more sympathetic to, is people, many of the units that are part of the Hello Housing project, which is called Bright in My Backyard, are building for extended family because they want to shelter together now because of the pandemic.
Mm-hmm. Great. Just jump back over to San Jose real quick. Sarah, I'm curious, this, ADU concierge and so forth, that's great. They don't pay for it in San Mateo County. Do they pay for it in City of San Jose? Is there a charge, or is it just included with the ADU ally work that you do? Oh, you're on mute, Sarah.
It's already included. There aren't any additional fees for my service whatsoever. The only time that you're really putting money down is when you say, okay, I'm ready. I'm submitting those plans. I'm going through plan review. That's the only time you really pay for the city, and those are permitting fees.
That's great. And do you know, is San Jose seeing much in the way of neighbor resistance, or is it going pretty smoothly like what it sounds like in San Mateo?
I think it goes pretty smoothly. I get, the questions of, is this legal and how high can it be? And then, of course, we share the information online because it is there and free for everyone to see that, if something's being constructed next door, take a look at the requirements. If it's 2 stories and the single family home is 1, it usually is safe to say that it is allowed, and we can move forward with that. So I do get some questions of what's happening, what's going on, how can you help me figure this out? And then we take care of it, of course, on a city level, and then sharing those resources and information to give them some peace of mind that what's happening next door is fine.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, that's great. Let's shift gears a little bit. Getting residents to understand the role that they play in helping to house folks is an important component that we've been talking about. There's public perception and permit processes and cost and so forth. There's also laws and codes. ADUs are expected to meet California's green building standards, and in many cases, those codes are designed for large single-family buildings or larger multifamily residential buildings, not small-scale construction. So how do we balance the health of these occupants and the health of the environment? I mean, we're in a global climate crisis, right? How do we, balance that with reducing the complexity and cost for owners to be a part of the solution? So Wes, I'm going to throw this over to you as the director of LEED at the USGBC. Where you're responsible for the alignment with green building codes. Can you help us get into the tensions between, codes and whether or not they're a good fit for this type of small form construction?
Yeah, thanks, Darin. That's a tough question. The simple answer is how do we simplify, right? How do we get to scale with simplifying a lot of the things? I mean, so at USGBC and with the LEED rating system that I help, write and create with our team, we do a lot of work on, commercial buildings, multifamily, and certainly residential homes. But we tend to be on the larger building size of that spectrum. So what I've seen is building codes and rating systems and things like that have gotten more complex as the challenges get more challenging and difficult, and as we make improvements, as the standards are raised. I mean, think about like low VOC paints and coatings, 20 years ago, 10 years ago, to where they are today as being standard. Same thing with energy efficiency. So things have gotten better in a lot of ways, but that's meant that to keep improving and hit the targets we want, we have to keep getting more and more rigorous and strenuous, and that does add to complexity. I mean, just looking at, codes, they've always been developed as a way to protect life, health, safety. And they start out being kind of about acute things like earthquakes and fire and really important things like that. And over time, we've started to think about how do codes incorporate things like protect from threats outside the home, like climate change, and how does that affect? And I mean, a case in point this year, right? I live in the East Bay, and what was it, 3.5 weeks stuck indoors, couldn't go outside, couldn't open windows because of the smoke. And, I live in a pretty well-insulated, somewhat modern home, about 20 years old, but it was built very green, double insulated windows and, radiant heat and all this, but we couldn't open the windows because of that time. We don't have a central air system or a central heating system. It was built to be naturally ventilated and coast through those hot days and cold nights. And it was just, it's hard to do that when you're building for a code that isn't keeping pace with climate change and resilience. So the codes have had to pick up new strategies and techniques, and that often means more complexity. I think the California Building Code, which is one of the best in the world, has about 6,000 pages in it currently. Now, not all of that is applicable to residential, of course, and there's other things like checklists and reference standards that even make that more, but that is a lot to get through, especially when you're trying to build something quick and fast. So I don't have all the answers for us today, but I think that's one of the big pictures. And when you think about like a green code, and are there things that perhaps aren't as relevant to small buildings, such as ADUs? I think there are some pieces where we can find ways to streamline. Like there probably aren't as many considerations around site runoff and landscaping and things like that. But other things like water efficiency certainly have a place to play. There's been great strides in water conservation in the state, and that's certainly important. Another one that comes up is waste management. Like we have a requirement of recycling 65% of waste on all projects pretty much that get a permit. And does that make sense on a small project like this to track and monitor all that waste? Maybe there could be solutions where you just say, take the things there, or pre-approve a package of materials that are designed in a factory with zero waste or low waste. And that can be a waiver, another way to do it. And the other thing I'd say is that as we think of codes and the ADUs, the indoor environmental quality becomes all the more important. We're building tighter and tighter homes, more and more energy efficient. And that means that everything we put in them and bring into those homes affect the indoor air quality all the more. And so we got to make sure we've got low emitting finishes, and we've got good ventilation, and filtration now is a big, who wants to move into a home that doesn't have good HEPA filtration now after the fires we've seen the last few years? So I don't think we want to cut corners on things like that, but there probably are ways to standardize or come up with packages that could be approved or pre-approved as a way, and maybe like you're saying at the state level, maybe not so much local. And I'm sure there's been work done around that with the other experts on this call and on this group. But those are the things where I think codes, they still provide so many benefits, but there are probably some opportunities for innovation while also still protecting those benefits that we want to keep from green building and health and wellness.
So do you have a sense of, these strategies, what might be, are there barriers to implementing those strategies? What's holding us back from moving forward with that and resolving some of these conflicts? Are there interests that might be in conflict, groups that are in conflict? Do you have a sense of, what some of those barriers might be?
Yeah, a couple, like in the code space, and the building officials on the call today, I saw some on that survey, so please speak up and contradict me. But codes, it's difficult to be the first one to do something different and new. And so if there's a way to get some research behind it, or again, these pre-approved kind of packages or measures that are appropriate for these ADUs that maybe aren't as commonplace as you see in a single family, like that could be a place to reduce some of the barriers for code approvals, or make it not so hard for a homeowner to have to feel like they're going on their own to get something approved, and it's seen as like an alternative means or methods. Mm-hmm. And we have examples of things like straw bale homes, which used to be this crazy idea, right? But now there are codes for it, and it's well established, and it's streamlined. You can do it pretty simply. There's also a lot of, I think there's a desire to make it more exciting and more fun to build these units and get them. I guess that's more on the education side, but how do we make these homes, these ADUs, kind of more attractive to the wider population? And I'm reminded of there was a summit in Portland, Oregon, I think it was last year, and they've done it the last couple of years, called Build Small, Live Large. And the idea is to try to, really embrace that tiny home movement, but also it's all about your carbon footprint, your environmental footprint, not just a small house or a tiny home, but also highlighting all the other environmental benefits. And I think that's something that, it's not exactly a code thing, but it fits on the education side and maybe the neighborly side too. If these ADUs are seen as a cool, hip thing, that could help with adoption and acceptance. And I think maybe the last thing I'll say is that we have to look at, with codes, again, getting more increasingly stringent and tight, which is important for the state. Also looking at the other things that are coming up around the environment, such as embodied carbon. like the materials we're making homes and buildings out of, and understanding that, you know, there could be a trade-off. Maybe you don't have, I'm not sure. There could be trade-offs on like the operation energy and what you make your buildings out of. And maybe there are packages or prefab, or I think somebody was mentioning 3D printing of homes and things. Like, what are those made of? What are the materials? What's the impacts that they have on the environment? So all of these things in combination have to kind of work together. And there's got to be a willingness to I wouldn't say experiment. That's it could be a dirty word in codes, but a willingness to accept some of these new strategies and work to find solutions for code approvals, for accepting them on projects, on buildings, and getting homeowners excited about it.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's great. You know, keeping on this theme of health, you know, health of the occupant, health of our planet. I want to talk a little bit real quickly with the panel about existing ADUs that may not have been built with permits or to code. In Oakland, we did some research, and we estimate that there may be as many as 10,000 unpermitted ADUs, and that, you know, many of these ADUs would benefit from being legalized and inspected and issued permits to ensure that they're built in a health and safe way. But many homeowners are reluctant to try to legalize those properties. And so I wanted to talk with Peggy and Sarah about their work, you know, trying to permit unpermitted ADUs. And maybe Sarah, we can start with you to see what San Jose is doing.
Sure. Yes, we do have an ADU amnesty program. So anybody with an unpermitted ADU on the property, we do have a program for that. Through January 2020, homeowners can potentially save up to $10,000 or more through this program. And the first 2 steps of the program, you're not signing on, you're not really giving anything for an address, you're not signing on at all whatsoever. It's easy to look at our checklist that we have online, answer those questions, and then have a conversation with a different coordinator. It's the ADU amnesty coordinator, but you can still always start the conversation with me and I can get you connected with them. But usually it's answering those questions on the checklist, seeing if the property qualifies. And there are some particular standards for that online, making sure that what you have is that unpermitted ADU that could potentially go through amnesty. Otherwise, you're working with a code enforcement inspector to double check some plans, address code compliance, and then going over to us. And always with any jurisdiction, I'm absolutely sure, it's a focus on, let's get this housing stock safe, habitable for whomever is going to be living there, you, a family member, anyone renting it. So it's not about enforcing this is what you have to do. It's, you know, we've found out. It's let's be your partner in safety, and we want to be able to help you with that. So I did mention that not all unpermitted ADUs will go through the amnesty program, but if it does qualify, you stand to save some fees, and especially if you rent it. Renters do, well, landlords have the biggest option to save the most amount of money. So it's always with the intent of, you have something unpermitted, we want to help you get that up and running so that you can, so that you have peace of mind. You know, it's safe, you can have the insurance cover it, whoever is renting it, super happy about it, things like that. So that's where we stand on that.
Mm-hmm. Great. Peggy, do you have anything like that in San Mateo? Oh, we can't hear you. There you go.
Yeah, there we go. So we have 2 pilot programs, one in San Mateo County. I don't think it's quite as extensive in San Jose, but we recognize this is really a big issue, as you've mentioned. In East Palo Alto, where we have lots of non-conforming garage conversions, a collaboration of advocates and some housing folks got together and are working on 4 units to try to bring them up to code. There was some foundation money to do this. They found it's expensive, and that the challenges in these units are more extensive than they thought they probably would be. But they're working on that, and as any pilot, there are lessons learned, and our hope is to continue working, that team continues working in East Palo Alto. We also have a county pilot for the unincorporated area that's being run by our county planning department. They're working with the goal is to work with about 20 homeowners to test a new process. And to implement this new process, we contracted with a third-party inspector to essentially provide arm's length between the county and our enforcement requirements and people who do have violations that want to bring their units up to code. I know that there was some initial reluctance on the part of property owners, some distrust, but I know that they've recently working with at least two or three and maybe more property owners, and we're seeing some success. The other thing that I would add is that it took a long time to develop this program for the unincorporated area, because we recognized that the cost of bringing some of these units absolutely up to standard would be totally prohibitive, and the rent would have to skyrocket. We wanted to maintain these as affordable units. So our planning department worked with the code enforcement staff and also with the fire marshals to come up with sort of something intermediate between absolute code compliance and something that was complied and created a healthy and safe environment. So that was a very key step in this whole process. So again, they're all work in progress, but we recognize that this is a really important part of working with ADUs.
Quickly, Sarah and Peggy, in that effort, were there any discussions around city or county liability, right? So like you become aware of an unpermitted ADU that's just this total death trap, right? And the owners decide not to move forward to legalize it for whatever reason. And concern about government liability. Was that ever brought up, and how did you deal with that if it was?
So in San Mateo County, we have an ordinance that for someone who has serious violations, if the unit could be red tagged, if it's uninhabitable, then it is the property owner is liable for up to 3 months rent payment to those folks and providing the tenants additional housing. So in those situations, we have another path that we take. We do not allow things that are absolutely unsafe to exist if we know about them.
Anything to add, Sarah, or is that?
Unfortunately, I don't have much, anything to add in addition to that. Yeah, no, I'm sorry.
No, that's great. All right, so we're going to switch to some audience Q&A. And the way this is going to work is if you have a question, go ahead and throw that in the Zoom Q&A or chat. And we have Build It Green staff working behind the scenes to compile those. And some of those will be for everyone, and some of those would be directed at specific panelists. So the first question is, I've consulted on custom single-family homes for over 10 years. This past year, I'm working solely on ADUs. What is clear is that energy code is not adjusted for small homes, and we are overbuilding the ADU structure in order to meet Title 24 requirements on these small buildings. Is anyone looking at this? Maybe Wes, do you want to take that?
Yeah, I don't know. I'd love to hear what the county and the city are thinking of too, but that seems like a big problem, right? Or could be a big stumbling block, because again, we want to have high efficiency and very stringent energy codes and codes that protect our health, but they can't be at the expense of not doing anything, right? And so even I was made aware that at the state, we have some tax incentives for affordable housing, and they're looking at rolling back some of the environmental regs as kind of a tax boost, because they're saying that they're trying to speed up the rate of building housing. So I would just say that that's I think a really important thing. Like, we need to have an honest discussion around how efficient is or how maybe if you put solar panels on the roof and have efficient skin and envelope, like maybe that's good enough. Or oftentimes the green attributes, the energy efficient and all those are singled out as being the expensive part. And I know the energy code is complex. So that can be a challenge, but I think one of the solutions could be to have some pre-approved like packages. I know we've had those in the energy code for a long time for residential, and they're often not really tuned to small spaces, or they have big things in them that make it hard to follow that package completely, like the window wall ratio or something is so tight that no one takes the prescriptive path, if you will. But I think there could be a tune-up that allows a little more in the way of understanding that a smaller building is going to have and use less energy. So maybe it doesn't need to be quite as efficient per square foot as the bigger single family homes. So anyway, that's some of the things that come to mind. I wonder if the city or the county have looked at that as well. Or you, Darin, in Oakland, that's probably come up too, right?
Well, I hear it a lot. I don't have a good answer. I mean, I think that's a good point, Wes. I would love to hear your perspective on like, how is this going to happen? So do you think that would come in internally through the code development process, or do you think it's state legislation, or do you think it's advocacy from organizations pushing it?
I think it's probably advocacy from organizations and from building officials and cities approaching. And there's also the Bayren program. That's a regional group of governments. They may have something they could work towards it. You know, and the energy code is such a long process and it's so detailed to get into, but I think there is a kind of an urgency here that there may be some momentum to help support. And it, you know, again, we're not trying to roll back the regs. We're not trying to say these buildings shouldn't be as efficient or whatnot, but maybe it's just an acknowledgement that there could be ways to speed up that compliance, or again, have these, you know, these kind of prescriptive packages or something that could be made simpler for everybody. So I know folks at the state are thinking of that, I'm sure. It's just they have a process that's been developed over many, many, many years. And how do you fit into that? That could be a challenge. And from what I've seen it doing advocacy at the state level in California, it is those coalitions that help it, and the building officials and the local governments showing up at those meetings and having a position and pushing for it carries a lot of weight. So that could be a takeaway.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, Wes, you were earlier talking about pre-approved packages. That's related to this next question. At the county and city level, there's been efforts to develop pre-approved plans. Number one, has there been any work to look at statewide pre-approved ADU plans? I don't think there is, but maybe you all know more than I do. Two, can you provide more information on the pre-approved plans mentioned in San Jose? So first question, anyone aware of a statewide pre-approved plan discussions or efforts? And then how does pre-approved plans work in San Jose? Sarah?
I'm not familiar with any state initiative to get together and say, okay, here's a blanket pre-approved ADU for the state. In San Jose, we do have a pre-approved ADU program. Vendors will contact us, go through the regular plan review process to permit a master file. And then anybody that's interested in that potential or the pre-approved design can visit the webpage, see what is available. We have 6 different vendors now. My apologies for not knowing the total. It's more than 6 different designs, maybe 10, up to 15. And the intent is you're just kind of browsing around online. Maybe you don't want to do the custom build. And then you can contact those vendors through their webpage and their contact information, take a browse through the plans that they have to offer, the designs, because they don't share the plans specifically. And then you would contact them and they would be not essentially your ADU ally, but they would take all of that information and run with it through the city. So they would apply for you, go through plan review, they understand the requirements for issuance. If it was a manufactured home and you need a crane to install it, then you would need special permits after that. So they really, the pre-approved ADU vendors in San Jose, they really do act as, okay, do you want to have this done? We're here to help you every step of the way. And then of course, they can ask me, you can ask me, all of that.
Hey, Darin, can I jump in on that? Not picking up on the last, I guess, the first question you had about pre-approved at the state level. And there's some good chat happening. They're talking about the manufactured homes and pre-approved by the state. I know that HCD, Housing Community Development, does regulate manufactured homes in the state. So maybe there's a way that some of these ADUs could be wrapped in under that type of regulation or code compliance, as opposed to being an on-site building. I mean, it is on-site. Sometimes they're constructed on-site, but there might be a way to get a waiver or a change or something like that to allow those more streamlined or off-site kind of approvals through packages. So it sounds like you got some good experts on the chat there that could be helpful for reaching out to.
Yeah, thanks, Wes, that's a good correction to what I said. Yeah, I mean, through the state's factory built housing program, in a way, that's a pre-approval system through the state certified factories. So that's a good point.
Yeah, and maybe there's a way to modify the definition of an ADU in a factory built. Like, I don't. Anyway, something to play with there, perhaps.
Interesting. Yeah. The only other thing that I would add is that our regional housing trust, HART, has in the process of developing 5 or 6 pre-approved plans for particularly green units. So I don't know exactly where that process is. I know that it's been ongoing for about 1.5 years. So I'm assuming they're probably pretty close to releasing those. And I have no doubt that we'll be linking to them or providing them on our website in the future. And HART would also be providing them on our website too.
So the next couple questions are related to income. And so I'm going to ask both of them. The first one is, what's being done at the city and county levels to incentivize or regulate ADUs to ensure a high percentage of affordable housing for those in need, such as fixed or low-income residents, to actively combat rising rents of gentrification? So to me, I read that as really around the making ADUs themselves affordable to lower income tenants. The second question is, Peggy, does your one-stop shop model prioritize lower income or other need-based homeowners? So that's the flip side. This is around lower income owners, making sure that both of these groups, lower income tenants and lower income owners, have access to ADUs. And maybe Peggy, we'll start with you on what the one shop model does.
Sure. Yes, that was the original intent, to focus on property owners who would need this type of assistance, who maybe didn't have the income to do this on their own. And it also was the goal to make sure that these units would be affordable long-term. I don't know exactly all the details about how things worked out. Everything has become a little bit more complicated since the pandemic, but we did want to move forward with the program, and that was the original intent. By using public money to provide this concierge service, the intent was there should be a public benefit.
Mm-hmm. And Sarah, does any of your program take into account income eligibility for owners or tenants?
I am not certain about the detail to that level. I can certainly look into it and get back to us, but not during the webinar. If we have additional questions, I can certainly look into that.
Mm-hmm. And I'll just mention that in Oakland, we are working on developing with a philanthropic partner, a financial assistance program that would be twofold. It would provide financial assistance to lower income owners to build ADUs without income restrictions on the ADU, which would enable wealth building opportunities for the owner. And then financial assistance to owners regardless of income, but coupled with income restrictions for the ADU occupant. That's something we hope to launch early next year, so stay tuned for that. Next question is around what I would call the cousins of ADUs, and that's tiny homes on wheels. This question says, I understand tiny homes on wheels are a lot cheaper than built in place and are legal in San Jose and Santa Clara County. What do panelists think of these, and is there a push to allow them in other jurisdictions? I'm in unincorporated Contra Costa. So it started with San Jose. I don't know, Sarah, do you want to talk anything about tiny homes on wheels?
Sure. The tiny homes on wheels are pretty new. There are some specific requirements, of course, setbacks and the size. You just have, I mean, essentially, you have a little place to park, you drive it up, you get permits through the city. It is kind of a pretty fast review through planning mainly. You're meeting all of the requirements. We do have a checklist. It's the Tiny Home on Wheels permit checklist. If you get to our landing page, it is there. And then you mainly have planning review. And then after that, it's building, electrical, and plumbing, and then permit issuance, and then a few inspections, and you're done. So it is a pretty quick, simple answer. Most of the certification is through the DMV because it is considered like a vehicle at that point. Addressing isn't required for those. We just recently had our first 2, which is so exciting. But yeah, they're eligible in San Jose as long as the property qualifies. And let me know if you have any questions.
Anyone else have thoughts on tiny homes on wheels?
The more solutions we can get, the better. That's all I would say.
Here, that's what I think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I would add, I mean, you ask about the NIMBY issue, there are issues around tiny homes on wheels. So that becomes a NIMBY issue. I know we've looked at it. I know they were not legal for a while, and I don't know whether that's changed, but I know there has been neighborhood pushback.
Okay, got questions flooding in about code. There's lots of code experts in here. So Wes, I'm going to put you on the spot here. So this question says, back to code. Regarding ventilations for small homes in smoky areas, what are your thoughts on air-to-air heat exchangers with HEPA filtration?
Yeah, absolutely. I think those are the kinds of technologies we're seeing from kind of things like Passive House and maybe a push towards electrification for some systems. Yes, absolutely. Those are the way to go. There's another question about, is it even realistically possible given the different climate zones in the state? Maybe one of the packages is suitable for all climate zones, right? It's super insulated and you have one of those heat exchangers and a HEPA filter on it with the solar panel on the roof, and it's like, checks all the boxes, statewide or maybe in all but the mountainous regions or something like that. And there's probably some building designers that are designers that are looking into that. But I think there's possibilities there. I mean, one of the strategies that we've seen in an efficient home design is to go above and beyond the regulations and really future code proof your buildings. This is kind of the other side of it, right? One side is do the minimum to meet code, and it's always changing, so that can be expensive to keep up with. The other side is just go deep into it, go to the super insulated walls and windows and heat exchangers and all electric if you can, things like that, and you're code proof. You don't have to worry about it. And if you can maybe switch some fuels and things like that to save cost, it can pencil out. But I think that's a challenge for smaller units, again, because we're trying to scale up the adoption. But once you get past that code barrier and you've insulated from it, you also kind of send a signal to the market that we want those heat exchangers, we want those HEPA filters, we want the super efficient equipment, and it's no longer an option for those building types. And manufacturers will hopefully be more likely to produce them in the state. And that kind of thing. So there's more competition and the prices go down. So there's all these kind of market tensions that go with it. Again, one of the benefits of prefab modular packaging things together is to send that signal and get the economies of scale if you can.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. A lot of great questions, a lot that unfortunately we couldn't get to because we only have a few minutes left. But the staff at Build It Green is going to try to do their best to get answers to those folks that we couldn't get to. So we've got time for one last question for each panelist. And Sarah, I want to start with you. If you were the ADU god that controlled all of our ADU regulations and universe, what's the one thing that you would do that would have the biggest benefit on promoting ADUs in the state?
Oh gosh. Throughout the state, I don't know that I could answer just on the state level. I know that in my daily work, education and helping homeowners understand where their money is going is really important. The simple idea of, yes, I want this, and then how do I do it? It's also how do I pay for it? How long is it going to take? How many professional teams do I need to have in my corner? And really, do I want to do this with all of this information? So, apps are really huge right now. And Peggy mentioned Symbian, which is a really good option for making it approachable and like in little bite-sized pieces, consumable for someone that isn't, keenly aware of their property, if they're in a flood zone, what that even means. Because those types of things are really big for a project. And if you're not aware of it, it can change your entire perspective and whether you want to do it or not. So just kind of looking a bit more into things, that's what I would expect from homeowners. Do a little bit more research, look into it a little bit more. And then from local jurisdictions and also some larger companies potentially, having some more resources to help people understand in those little bite-sized ways of, okay, you want to do this, this is what you may have to do, and then take them kind of on a journey that has more visual guides, like Peggy's kind of how-to booklet. I think just getting the information out there, regulations and things like that, webinars like this are really great. Yeah.
Great. All right, Peggy. 60 seconds to answer this. It's hard to do a panel without talking about COVID. And I know we brought it up really, really quickly earlier, but I want to go back to that really quickly and get your thoughts on, given the pandemic, folks are talking about, well, what does that mean for the future of cities and regions and counties? How do you think COVID is impacting ADUs? Are ADUs less important now because of COVID? Are they more important or irrelevant? What do you think?
I think they're more important. And I think they're more important but I think the way we need to think about them is that their purpose may change over time. And somebody may be adding an ADU right now for a family member. They might be adding it to become an office. They might be adding it to become a classroom for their children. But those needs are going to change over time, and that ADU can be repurposed based upon the situation. And I think that's the way we need to look at it.
Great, thanks. All right, Wes, 60 seconds, you get the last word. Pull out your crystal ball, thinking about ADUs and construction technology and materials and methods, green building, prefab. How do you think small buildings are going to be built in the next, say, 25 years? What are we going to be doing then?
More panelized, modular, printed, factory built, offsite built, where they can control the standards, control the waste, make sure the supply chains of materials are low carbon and healthy and all that. And hopefully, this is kind of a segue to your first question too, to Sarah. Maybe the state has a code that's just for ADUs or for small residential buildings and have a separate code section rather than trying to shoehorn it into these others. Why don't we have an ADU code? And that could really propel. It's simple, it's green, it's efficient, it's effective. That could hopefully propel all this into the future. Because a lot of those innovative technologies also have the same code challenges. Like how do you code approve a 3D printed building?
Right.
We could spend hours on that too. Thanks.
Well, we could spend hours, but we're out of time. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to the panelists and the audience for joining today. This is really fascinating. I learned a lot. I hope you learned a lot. I want to thank Build It Green for putting this all together and bringing us to this space. So if you want to learn more about ADUs and continue this conversation, particularly around ADUs as a regenerative process, go ahead and register for Build It Green's next fall forum, which is on November 18th. Called Rethinking Community and Neighborhood Assets. So you can register by going to builditgreen.org and staff will put that in the link, put a link to that in the chat. Hope to see you there. And with that, we're done. Have a nice day, everyone.